What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the BREWtally Speaking Podcast. I am one of your hosts, John, and with me, as always, is Daniel Tseri. How are you doing this evening?
Dude, I am, barely alive, but I'm doing all right.
Yeah, you had a rough day.
Yeah, it wasn't the best. I ended up getting, sent home from work for having a fever. And I've had a really nasty sinus infection for the past couple of days. And, in this current day and age, this environment, coming to work with a fever is not the best course of action. So they're like, yeah, get out of here.
Yeah, absolutely. This episode's guest is Christopher Hall, the vocalist of Stabbing Westward, also a guitar player and partial programmer and producer and jack of all trades, I guess.
I think the word you're looking for is extraordinaire.
Yes, that is a word I could use. This was actually kind of fun. The band had put out a new single as of when we did this interview, but then basically COVID happened and seemingly all the plans the band had, just like everybody, went to shit. So now I don't know when the record that they were supposed to be working on or putting out, I don't know when that is going to be coming out. But this was a fun interview. We wouldn't be known as huge Stabbing Westward fans, and I know maybe with this podcast you wouldn't assume like, oh, of course you guys are going to have Stabbing Westward on. But I think, especially when Dan does like New Metal May. Is it New Metal May?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. For some reason it didn't sound right. As I was saying, I was like, it's not New Metal May. What do you guys call it? You have too many theme months, so it's a little bit hard to keep them all in track and not get them mixed up.
We only have two. We have New Metal May and Industrial December. Yeah.
That one doesn't roll off the tongue as well.
Yeah, look out for KMFDM. That's going to be rough.
Did you already start listening to all their records?
I mean, I kind of have no choice. Yeah.
Are you guys actually going to do the MFKD, whatever the reverse of that is? Are you counting that?
We'll talk about it.
Okay.
It's kind of hard not to talk about it.
Right. But yeah, no, Stabbing Westward, this was one of those that I had the opportunity to do thanks to being furloughed. Like a lot of the interviews actually we've done pretty recently. And, it just started off so easy. I typically don't, we don't just typically bullshit with someone for a solid 20, 30 minutes first. And it got to the point where, as you I don't remember if I kept it in or not, but his kid came in. He was like, oh, I'll be off the phone in like 5 minutes. I was like, oh shit, I haven't asked you anything.
Hey man, it happens. I mean, sometimes you just get into that flow of conversation and there's not really any way out of it, and I like those chats. Like, I don't care what anybody says. Like, I know, like, objectively speaking, it's not like considered professional or whatever, but like, I don't know, man. As time goes on, I care less and less about that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. Sometimes I'm just like, I love the idea that it could be a rather, conversation, like, listening to the ID10T podcast today with Ted Danson and his wife, Mary, I can't pronounce her last name, like Streamberger or whatever. I think it's the mom from Step Brothers. And it was just like so great to hear them all like kind of bullshitting and talking, and intermittently, they would kind of ask each other questions and so forth. But just as a whole, it was like, it just felt like, the whole thing that, I think everyone who listens to podcasts and enjoys them will always say is the reason they like them is because it makes it feel like you're a fly on the wall in an environment where you get to listen in on a conversation between two people. And I think in that regard, I think this episode with Chris, I think is really fun. I mean, even after sending it over to the publicist after the fact, it was like, oh, it's so crazy how like you're able to just kind of put people into an ease, like they're able to just kind of talk to you, and it's like, well, that's sort of the whole point of these things, isn't it? Is just to have a conversation.
Yeah, I mean, conversationalists. I think the appeal of podcasts isn't just like landing a great interview. I mean, I know we enjoy that on our end, but like, it's really just having those conversations. You get to be like, yeah, I chatted with somebody from Stabbing Westward. And yeah, maybe it didn't like have a lot of direction, but I really enjoyed that I got to have that chat. And I don't know, it makes people seem very real.
Yeah, most definitely. And especially with a band, like something we like to kind of focus on a little bit is the fact that, getting a band and getting someone like Chris from Stabbing Westward was one of those bands that, kind of broke up and went away before the internet really became what it is, and long form interviews kind of became a thing. So it's really cool to kind of get to chat with someone. It almost kind of reminded me of the John Clayton Pitch Shifter episode, where it's like you're just kind of talking about an era of music making that's so prolific to us as like mid 30s, because it's like everyone knew Stabbing Westward growing up, like especially if you were into the kind of music that we all were. So the fact that it's like, oh, I'm getting to talk to the dude that I used to watch on MTV like almost every day, and I'd hear that song on my local radio station like every day. It's kind of surreal. It's just, I don't know, it's so weird, but it's really cool at the same time, because I hope that basically I will be able to, or that we will be able to find fans that kind of maybe forgot about the band.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest with you, I was actually kind of surprised whenever this kind of came across the desk, because I was like, man, to be honest, I haven't really kept track of that band.
Well, they just got back together probably 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's not really been that long, and they haven't done a whole lot since. But I think the thing that it will be interesting to me is just to kind of see what comes of the quote-unquote reunion, and just the new inspiration to create music under the Stabbing Westward banner again.
Yeah, totally. And I think this is pretty exciting. I would say that I was a fairly big fan back in the day. Me and my friends used to be a big fan of how just dark their records were.
Absolutely. Well, I think this is as good a chance as any to get into the conversation with Chris of Stabbing Westward, and we will talk to you guys on the other side of it.
Hi, John. This is Chris from Stabbing Westward.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Sitting here with a beer right after a long day of work.
Oh, I wish I was there. It's still the middle of the day here, so.
Well, I mean, that's the pros and or cons of being out on the West Coast versus here in the Midwest. So.
Yeah. Where are you?
Michigan. Grand Rapids, more specifically.
Oh, okay. Oh, right on. I got one of my tattoos in Grand Rapids.
Oh, where at?
It was a long time ago. Was the Reptile House in?
Oh
Grand
shit!
Rapids?
The Reptile House. Yes.
Yeah. We played there ages and ages ago, and there was a tattoo shop below it.
That's right.
After sound check before the show, I got a tattoo there. So.
Man, it is kind of interesting sometimes in doing these chats, talking about the Grand Rapids I kind of fell in love with as a young kid coming up here from Kalamazoo and so forth, and coming to see shows and all that, because for lack of a better term, I sometimes don't feel like kids understand what it was like to kind of escape from small towns or whatever, to go be a part of a fledgling music scene, and to feel something to kind of escape. And I feel like now everyone's just so up their own ass and trying to just topple over and put everyone down, that there is no local scene anymore, really kind of anywhere at times.
Now, do you think that it's because you're old, or do you think because social media has ruined everything for the whole world?
So here's the thing. I used to book shows, and, I got tired of people going, there's no good bands, whether it be on the national scene or even locally. And it really was dealing with local bands that kind of drove me out of doing that, because it was just absurd, the egos that I was dealing with. And I'm like, but you haven't done anything. Like, why do you need $800 to play 5 minutes from your house? Like, that's absurd.
Right. One of the funniest things we run into now is when we tour, we generally fly in with our gear,
right?
Or no, fly in without gear, and it's almost always local support. Mm-hmm. And the local support will come in with like 4
I already know where you're going.
stacks of gear. Like, they'll have like so much gear and all this lighting and all this production, and then they'll have their t-shirt setup. Will have like 15 t-shirts and coffee mugs and mouse pads and LED lighting, and they're just like over the top ridiculous. And we just roll in with like a couple of guitars, a laptop, and a projector. That's like our whole thing. And we usually have to, either rent or borrow a drum kit, which tends to be the local band. it's always like the drummer doesn't want to share his drums because he's like, well, I've had these heads on since I bought the kit and I don't want to put any dents in them, stuff like that. And it's just absurd. Like you said, the egos of local bands can sometimes be crazy. And it's like, well, the show is sold out, but I'm pretty sure people paid the $38 to see us, not you. So just get up and play and have a good time. Don't make it this whole thing. And yeah, it's just weird.
I think the thing that's kind of weird about it at times to me even is just it's healthy competition is what drives bands, to hopefully be better and stuff like that, and it's kind of funny. I know this isn't necessarily in your vein, but I'm sure at least maybe in namesake you'll know who they are. But, the band Pop Evil, they are from here in Grand Rapids. And I remember, we're going to drop an episode with their guitar player in a couple of weeks. And I remember when they were like the first of 4 or 5, when, kind of speaking to what I'm saying, they were playing the main room of the Intersection, all local showcase, and able to sell out like an 800, 1200 cap room with all locals because all locals were that strong. And, one of them from the band coming up to my friend that was in the headliner band, and they're like, man, we just, want to thank you for getting us on this show, but like, how do we kind of get these opportunities you're getting, getting to open for Korn, getting the Budweiser and Jaeger sponsorships and so forth. And, my friend was just like, you just got to write better songs. It all starts there. And I kind of was looking at my friend like, dude, you're kind of a dick for saying that. But all these years later, I kind of realized
true.
That is where it starts.
True. Yeah, it's not about your hair. It's not about your costume or your mask or your makeup or your website. It all comes down to songs and songwriting. 100%. I would have said the same thing. Maybe not in an asshole way, but yeah, it all comes down to that. Like, it comes down to the music. We've played with bands that have pretty strong followings. Like we played with a band in Colorado, had a really strong following. Great looking guys, all wore masks and costumes and the whole production. And I thought, man, if they just had a single song with a chorus or a singer who could sing a melody, they'd be somewhere, but just, it's like all that imagery and stuff and social media presence can only take you so far. You have to have something people can latch onto.
Well, I think that's kind of the thing, and maybe, kind of speaking to what you were saying a little bit ago about how, is it my age or is it really the reality of the situation? And I think there's a couple of things, because as someone who kind of likes listening to a lot of behind-the-scenes things, from growing up in the 80s myself to even, having friends that have had varying levels of success in the industry, whether it be, in the band writing or in bands, or even producing or songwriting, just multifaceted parts of the industry. I always love to learn how the industry works and why, as much as you can pinpoint why something is successful versus why something isn't. And I think, the thing that I kind of come back to is, a lot of people like to talk about the 80s and 90s and how many one-hit wonders there were and all that kind of stuff. But, something that always kind of struck me was, A, we didn't have social media. So if you like something or it caught, it's because it was predominantly good. There was no bullshit marketing necessarily behind it, because you weren't seeing sponsored ads on Facebook and so forth. And, I guess that was technically applied in the sense of maybe a label, payola for radio and so forth, but...
Right. So it's sort of a similar thing, but less so. You couldn't force people. They could get songs on the radio to a certain point, but listeners had to respond. You can't completely brainwash people through just... You can play a bad song over and over again, and it's still a bad song.
Yes.
And there's, plenty of those in the history books. But one of the things that's funny about One Hit Wonder is that to get one hit is a huge success.
Absolutely.
That's like, there are bands from the 80s that are able to tour, cruise ships.
Yeah.
Big shows that had one song, Kaja Gugu, or there's a bunch of them. And to have, we kind of dismiss one hit wonders as losers, but they're winners, because for every one hit wonder, there's 1,000 no hit, no one cares, bands that came out and just no one ever heard of them. So I don't know.
Well, I think it's kind of interesting about that, though, is even, looking at, 80s, we'll say just 80s pop music. 80s pop music encompassed alternative, synth, industrial, regular pop, radio, active radio rock kind of stuff.
Yeah, rock radio,
What was considered pop, stuff like that, was really interesting. And even going into the 90s, it's like there was so much that crossed over into pop that it touched so many different genres that I think that was kind of what's exciting about being alive at that point and really getting into music, is that, especially being a product of MTV, is I could be in front of MTV all day and be exposed to up and coming or underground hip hop, underground, alternative, rock, metal, anything and everything in between. And it's like, now I feel like everything's so segmented now, where it's like, well, here's my little pocket of this, and I can't have any of my metal coming over into my pop music. And, I need my pop music to be, Ariana Grande or something like that. But even what's kind of been interesting as I get older about pop music is, and I think it was Ariana Grande actually, is, I'm listening to the song and I'm like, holy shit, they're using a fastball single, like their second or third single that didn't catch, but they're using its chorus as the chorus melody going on. And I was like, and this is a song people probably don't even know what the fuck it is, but it's just shocking to see, music that I grew up on already being sampled now in pop hits. And it's like, I think Dua Lipa was using INXS's Need You Tonight guitar riff as
Need You Tonight, yeah.
Yeah, as the as their vocal melody for her new single. And it's really interesting to be a student, I guess, of all kinds of music, to see what samples what and how they use it and reinterpret it for a lot of different things.
Yeah, I find it's important as I grow older to still listen to the radio and to still listen to what is happening musically in the world, because it's so easy when you hit a certain age to just go back to what you're used to keep. I mean, my Spotify playlist is pretty much 83 to 92, for the most part. I don't even listen to a lot of 90s, even though we were in it, because I grew up in the 80s. So all the music that inspired the 90s bands were the Cure and the Depeche Mode and the Joy Division and stuff like that. So that still tends to be my playlist a lot. And I go into a little bit of the 90s before we actually hit. But I still try to listen to the radio when I'm in the car, just to hear what's going on in the world. Like what's happening now? Is it any better? And I try and find positive things in music. I know that everyone's like, oh, pop music sucks or whatever. And it generally does, but there's still good, strong songs here and there that you can find.
Something that's kind of interesting to me in thinking of, kind of about you guys, and, I'll kind of ask you as someone who was kind of in it, because I want to say I think about 10 years older than me. I'm going to be 36 in a couple months.
Way older than that. I'm 20 years older than you, officially.
I never want to, assume, and it's like, you see things on the internet and you're like, is that correct? I don't know. But, that being said, something I heard a really interesting, I don't want to call it a factoid, but maybe it's more of an opinion that someone, and I wish I could remember who it was specifically, but I think I was listening to Eddie Trunk's podcast a couple of weeks ago, and he was talking to some producer, and they were talking about the difference in trends and sounds over the decades. The 70s kind of had more of a warm, kind of vibrant tones to a lot of their music, and the 80s was kind of really thin and loud. And, someone goes, well, yeah, you realize that the production and the sound of a decade is based on the drugs that people were using in the industry. So, the 70s and...
I think...
Good.
I think a lot of it was a technology, too. I think that there was a lot of tube amps and no synthesizers in the 70s. And then by the time that you got to the 80s, there's a lot of thinner drum machines, thinner keyboards, the most cutting edge. The Roland Jazz Chorus was a solid state amp that had this but maybe people are drawn to those because of what you're saying, which my 4-year-old just walked in the room, so I can't discuss that topic. He just walked in holding a Wii controller, yeah. But no, for sure, whether it was ecstasy or cocaine or whatever they were doing back in the day, or weed, yeah, for sure. I know that a lot of records in the 80s got mixed too bright from people doing too many drugs, yeah, for sure.
So kind of getting a little bit more interview-based,
Okay.
It was kind of interesting, leading up to this, you guys... kind of hit on something I was going to ask, and you announced, obviously, that there's more music coming in the way of Wasteland, and as well as more music besides that. It seems that you guys have kind of been on a creative high since reuniting. What have you attributed to the outpouring of ideas?
Well, I never actually stopped writing. When the band broke up, I started a new band
The Dreaming
week before we broke up. Yeah, and I just kept writing this whole time, and I actually feel like that 10 or 12 year period gave me a chance to sort of figure out who I am as a writer and to hone my craft. I spent a couple of years being an assistant engineer for Brian Karlstrom, the engineer for Dave Jordan, who produced our third record. After the band broke up, I went and worked as just an assistant engineer, just a grunt. Got coffee, did the regular stuff. And he taught me all about producing and engineering and kind of the old school way of doing stuff. And I got to work with a bunch of bands doing that. So for me, that 12 years was, not only was I actively in a band putting out music and touring, but I was also sort of honing my craft. Because when I was in Stabbing Westward, we had 4 main writers. For the first record, it was me and Walter and Stuart, the guitar player. And after Stuart left on the first record and Andy, the drummer, joined, it was me, Walter, and Andy, not in that order. Andy, Walter, and me. I was sort of the bottom of the barrel writer. I would write lyrics and vocal melodies, and each album I get to write a song or two, but not significant amounts. I would have those sort of token, songs that they would stick on the album. So when the band broke up, it gave me a chance. Like, I had all these ideas in my head that I wanted to write. It gave me a chance to really work on that. So I'm kind of in a different mindset these days than I was back then. Walter didn't get to write much at all over that time, so he's had a bunch of ideas building in his head. So yeah, we have a lot of songs written, ready to go. But I think also the times, like, I'm at a point in my life where I just have a lot that I want to say, lyrically and musically. So that would be the main reason.
Also, speaking a little bit to the past, I have a very weird question that a friend of mine and I have been re-getting into in the last probably year or so. Since, you guys were going to be playing a couple of festivals around the area that maybe I'd get the opportunity to interview you and ask you this. But, your music is very cinematic on its own. And as such, you have been a part of a lot of soundtracks, most notably like Mortal Kombat, the first movie. And the interesting thing about it is while your music appears in the movie, it's not on the soundtrack, and I've noticed that is... I know,
isn't that weird?
It's a trend that I've noticed has happened to you quite a bit, so I was kind of wondering, why is that? What is the case of why you're in the movie but not on the actual soundtracks for a handful of movies? I
didn't really understand, what is the soundtrack if it's not the songs that are actually in the movie?
Absolutely.
I was really confused by that. Yeah, because the Mortal Kombat soundtrack went gold or platinum. It was a really big soundtrack, and all these other bands were on it and got gold and platinum records. But every time that a character from Mortal Kombat would walk on the screen, it would be our music playing in the background. And I'm like, yeah, we wondered about that, but we got paid fairly well for that stuff. Every time they play it on Showtime or HBO or whatever, we still get a nickel. But yeah, we never really knew the answer to that. I think that at the time, a different label curated the soundtrack. I think it was like not Sony. I think it was
TVT for Mortal Kombat.
Okay, yeah. So then they chose a lot of their bands. I know that System Machine Gun was on it, I believe. So yeah, I think TNT put their own stuff on it and just basically curated songs inspired by, and just sort of did a branding thing to get people to buy it. In the meantime, the guy who directed the movie and did the film score chose our music, and we were pretty fresh at that point. Ungod had just come out. I don't even know if it was out yet, but he had heard it and he liked how cinematic it was. So yeah, I think part of it had to do with John Fryer too, the guy who produced it. Had some connections with that as well.
Yeah, it was just always weird, like I said, your music is featured without. I don't remember if the vocals. It always seemed like the vocals, right where they would come in, that's when the music would cut out. So it's always like, what's going on with this?
It was generally just the instrumental sections. Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of, something that's interesting in thinking about, in prepping for this conversation and thinking about the band's career and the fact that, you guys went away. I'm sure you guys get compared to Trent Reznor and Nine Inch Nails quite a bit, just due to the time period and all that kind of stuff. But something that was interesting in thinking about it was, when Trent called it a day for Nine Inch Nails, he kind of had made the comment that, he just didn't connect with the lyrics anymore and some of the songs the way he did when he wrote them. He wasn't, a junkie more or less anymore going through all these things and, had to kind of figure out a new entry point when he decided to relaunch the band. As such, you're in a unique position where, the band broke up and then you were gone doing the Dreaming and so forth and then came back to it. And I kind of wondered, is there a similar story maybe for you where, you're coming back into something and you have to figure out how does Stabbing Westward fit into your life, all these years later?
Yeah, for sure. Time-wise, in all sorts of manners. Because lyrically, most of the older stuff is still okay for me to sing. Mm-hmm. Some of it is a bit ridiculous. Some of the really angry, violent mood swings and POMF, and some of these songs are a little over the top lyrically. Like just how many times can you drop an F-bomb in one song? Apparently, when I wrote that one, we were listening to a lot of Rage Against the Machine, and just like how many times can you swear in one song? But most of it, like Waking Up Beside You, is like a classic song. Shame is another song that I think aged really well lyrically. What Do I Have to Do? They're just timeless. They're about a time, an event, but at the same time, they could be about any event that's of similar nature, which you continue to go through. Even when you're married with children, you still have your ups and downs that you can tap into. And I never really had like a drug thing that I fell into or wrote about. So I didn't have like a super dark period of my life that I don't want to go back and revisit or whatever. I don't mind. And plus, I saw Nine Inch Nails play, God, probably a dozen times between the like late 80s, early 90s. The band I was in, Warsaw, opened for them a whole bunch of times. We actually toured with them for a while. And the way that Trent would completely immerse himself in the performance live every single night, just 100% in the music, in the role, in the character, tackling Rich Patrick, throwing the drums at Chris Brenna, just trashing the entire stage. That amount of intensity, that amount of like, I want to call it authenticity, but at the same time,
vulnerability.
It's like really, he would too. Really just, yeah, he would just create. He had this character, and he would just become that character for 2 hours, and that's that's not really what I do. I just kind of get up and sing, and I believe in these songs and I believe in the lyrics, but I don't have to like rip open old scars to sing them. I can still I get joy out of singing the songs, even if they're dark songs. I still find a certain joy in sharing that energy with the audience and whatnot. So yeah, it's not really a problem for me.
Kind of last two questions I have for you, since you got to get back to Lego Batman.
Mom came and took them, so we're good.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. Then I guess I'll expand a little bit on the question I just asked you. Kind of coming back to Stabbing Westward after, the Dreaming band cycle, did any of the past experiences that you went through in Stabbing Westward, especially with Walter and everything, inform you of what you wanted to do artistically this time around? Or even maybe from the business perspective this time around, where you're like, okay, if we decide to do this and come back as Stabbing Westward, X, Y, and Z needs to happen because, last time we did this, these are things that, collectively we weren't, we didn't agree upon or weren't into, or, just whatever. Because, you hear all the horror stories of, we signed bad deals, or we took tours because of, label said it was in our best interest and we kind of weren't into it or whatever. So I just kind of didn't know if maybe this time around you were like, these are the ways we kind of need to traverse being in Stabbing Westward now.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't have a terrible deal or anything. We were signed to Columbia and they were really good to us. We had internal problems in the band. There's just it wasn't even internal problems. We just had a lot of chefs in one kitchen. That was the problem. We had 3 guys, me, Andy, and Walter, that any single band would be lucky to have one of us, and we had 3 of us. So Andy wrote "What Do I Have to Do? Sometimes It Hurts Haunting Me." He wrote over dozens of songs in the band. At least half the sound of the band from the second album on was because of our drummer, Andy. And then Walter wrote the music to Save Yourself and Shame and Waking Up Beside You and So Far Away and all these other amazing tracks. And then I wrote the vocals and the vocal melodies, and I was the singer, blah, blah, blah. So I've got my own, ego and thing going on in my head. And a lot of times it was just hard to come to compromises. Everyone had sort of dug into their entrenched positions, and it got harder and harder with each record to find common ground and whatnot. And so one of the things Walter and I talked about, well, the other main thing was that on the final Stabbing record, all control was pretty much wrested away from the band by management and I don't want to use the word producer because I think that gives him way too much credit. A guy that the manager hired to make sure that the record sounded the way she wanted it to sound and not the way we wanted it to sound. And that process was it for us. When I was locked out of the studio and told I couldn't come back in because the guitar player that we'd only met a few days before was going to rewrite all the songs, that's when I kind of lost it a little bit. So one of the things that Walter and I agreed on is that we would never again allow anyone to ever tell us what we're supposed to sound like or who we're supposed to be. He and I would decide together, what the sound and the direction of the band. And honestly, it's not even a decision. We don't sit down and go, this is what we're going to be. We just are who we are. This is how we write. This is the music we put out. This is how we want it to sound. And that was our biggest thing. It's like we kind of want to do it ourselves. We didn't know if we wanted to do a label or not. And then I experimented with releasing the Dead and Gone EP ourselves, and that did really well. It sold out of every copy as fast as I could print them. But I had to print them. I had to go and I had to order them, go pick them up from downtown LA. And then for each CD that somebody purchased, I had to sign it, put it in a mailer, and then print out a label on my I set up like a little office in my spare bedroom of shipping, and I shipped 2,500 CDs. I'm like, okay, this is a full-time job, and we're getting $5 a CD. They cost $2.50 to make and $1 to ship. And I'm now supposed to split all this money with 4 guys, so I'm making like 40 cents an hour, and it's like 12, 13-hour days where I'm ignoring my children and my wife and sitting here stuffing envelopes. I'm like, we need an intern for this or something. This is stupid. This is not, in my job title. And that's when Cop International and John Fryer approached us and said, hey, we were wondering if, you guys wanted to do a full-length album with a label. I was like, yes. And Walter's like, but man, we did so well on that last record. I'm like, yeah, you did great because I PayPal'd you money, but I sat for 13 hours and got yelled at for spending all my time in my office, licking stamps. I got toxic poisoning from that. Remember when George Costanza's wife, Seinfeld, died? Yeah. Not true. I mean, that didn't happen, but yeah, that's what it felt like. I mean, I was in my room for 3 weeks solid, just mailing out, 2,500 CDs, which is a huge burden. And I'm like, yes, we'll sign a record deal. And they gave us really good terms. And the one stickler in the deal that was both the stick and the carrot was John Fryer was going to be the house producer for Cop International. And so he was the house producer for 4AD record in the 80s, which is one of the reasons that we got him on our first album was Dead Can Dance, so the Smoto Coil, Cocteau Twins, all these other amazing bands. He was the producer for all of it. And that's what Cop's trying to do this time around, is they're trying to have John sort of dial in the sound of the whole label so it's a cohesive sound, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But and it's awesome to work with John again, because he's like the guy that did our first 2 albums and kind of helped define the sound of the band. But he's going to mix our record, and that means that we are once again opening the door, which my 4-year-old just did as I said that, to somebody having an outside influence on the music. And that's really frightening for us. It's like the first couple mixes I heard from him, I knew they weren't going to sound exactly like our demos. We're not demos. We don't do demos. I've produced over a dozen records for other bands and done dozens of remixes for other bands like Pig and a bunch of other bands. And so I consider myself a producer. I don't consider myself a producer on the level of John Fryer or Dave Jordan, but I definitely consider myself a producer. And the mixes that we did on the Dead and Gone EP were 2 of my mixes, one of Walter's mixes. We're both very proud of our production skills. So to let go of that and to trust this guy that we definitely trust, to trust John to do it is just terrifying, because the last 5 times that we've trusted anyone with our music, whether it's The Dreaming or Stabbing Westward, it's scary. And so the first couple mixes we heard back from John sounded quite a bit different, and I was being super open-minded about it. I'm like, okay, those sound different. They don't sound like what I did, but they sound pretty good. And it's just really scary. And so we're right now trying to find that balance with John. But yeah, that's the most terrifying part for us right now is as we write a song, I know in my head what I want it to sound like, and then I give the tracks to John, who's never heard it before, and he interprets what's there. And it's like, well, I hope he makes it sound the way that we want it to sound, or better. So that's kind of the crux of it. And we've had people try and tell us what kind of band we should be and how we should look and blah, blah, blah. But at this point in our career, no one's bothering with that. They're just like, go do what you do. We're going to help you make the best movies you can make and get you some shows and stuff. So it's pretty exciting. It's just a little scary at the same time.
Well, it's interesting as you answered a question I kind of had and had been talking about, as music fans do, where they're like, man, why did this one, their last record just sound not like them? Well, there's the answer. So,
yeah, it was so bad. The demos, the demos to the songs were 1,000 times different. They sounded like Stabbing Westward.
Can you release those, or is there a clause? I said, can you release the demos at this point, or is that technically property of the label?
No, we could release them. We'd have to talk to Andy. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I'd want to, because when we started writing that fourth record, we were still on Columbia, and we were supposed to record it with Bob Rock.
Oh, wow.
So we were writing, a heavy industrial rock record like we normally would. And then all sorts of things happened at the same time. We decided to get rid of our manager, who had been awesome and gotten us 2 gold records, because we had this person telling us, yeah, you got 2 gold records, but you should have had platinum records. Look at these other bands that have platinum records. You could have done so much better. And kind of like worm tongue whispering in Theoden's ear. And but that's a little Lord of the Rings reference. But yeah, we fired someone that we trusted, and we fired someone that we should not have fired. And I think karma came back and bit us on the ass for that. And this person who was telling us, oh, we can do so much better, their plan was to turn us into sort of like a Goo Goo Dolls, I don't know, thing. It was weird. I never quite understood the vision. I'm like, well, we have 500,000 fans that like what we do. Wouldn't it be better if we just did what we did normally and they continued to like us? And that seems to me like a pretty good career. I don't want more. I'm okay with where we're at. I think it's cool. But there's people that just thought more, more. And I don't think that you can authentically change who you are and expect your fans to believe it. Like, I didn't believe it. I was like, this is blah. I don't like this at all. There's a couple of good moments on the record, but, once Mark left the band, the guitars took a turn down this like Brit pop kind of direction, and it just all went south really fast, and it was awful. And I do like So Far Away, though. I think that's a really good song.
I have one last question, and it might be really weird, but it was something I couldn't help but think of. So I had talked to John from Pitch Shifter a while back, and we got on the topic of talking about recording technology and just how it's changed since Pitch Shifter had started, and I would assume very much the same for you guys, especially using samples and drum programming and so forth. Did you find, I know obviously you were writing stuff for The Dreaming and everyone kind of had their own thing they were doing, but upon reuniting and having to kind of maybe potentially recreate some of these sounds or find some of your old loops and so forth, were you having to figure out ways to update and get some of these things from old technology that you're like, shit, they don't make a cable to put this into my new Mac or anything like that? Like, did you run into any of that at all?
Walter did. So Walter had all of the original sounds on a Kai S1000 discs. He had it on what were those called? A zip drive.
Oh yeah.
He had everything on a zip drive, and then he had all the backing tracks to all the songs, to all the tours that we ever did on ADATs.
Oh wow.
On ADAT tapes, which are basically VCR tapes, just hi-fi VCR tapes.
Yeah.
So he had to go on Craigslist and find an ADAT, and I think he went through 1 or 2 before he actually found one that worked. And he had to transfer. He had to basically put the tape in, hook up 8 outputs to the ADAT, put it into his Pro Tools, and record 8 channels off the ADAT, start to finish. And then he would send me these files as Pro Tools sessions, but they didn't have, like, they weren't locked to a grid. So, like, I didn't know what the tempo was. I'd have to figure out the tempo. And because it had been on tape, it had kind of stretched, and there's sections where I sort of got it would speed up by a little bit and then slow back down again. And a lot of it was the first 3 albums were pre-Pro Tools. So there's no Pro Tools on the first 3 albums. They were all on 24-inch tape. So those tapes would get transferred to an ADAT, which then got transferred to Pro Tools, which then got sent to me, which I put in Ableton Live. And I would have to find a tempo to match Save Yourself. And he didn't want to have to recreate any of the samples. He wanted to use the track. He's like, I think it's important that we're authentic and we use the tracks exactly the way that they were. You know, I don't want to update them. I don't want to sound like one of these bands where you come in and it's like, don't stand so close to me too, you know,
right.
By the police. And I'm like, okay, I get it. So then I would try and dial in these tempos, and instead of being like 104 BPM or 105, it'd be like 104.278. And then halfway through, like bar 16, I'd have to speed it up a tiny bit and then slow it back. And it was like just a mind numbing. And by the time I got to the 4th song, I'm like, let's decide exactly what songs we're going to play. Because if I don't have to do all these songs, I was like, I have kids, man. Like his kids are grown up and stuff like that. I have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, and I don't have time to, like, why am I doing this? How did I get this job? It was grueling. And so then I wanted to add, because all of it was really thin sounding too, I wanted to add some beefy, heavy synths that just updated it a little bit on top of what was there. But it was so hard because nothing would line up to the freaking grid. The grid in Pro Tools or the grid in Ableton is just, you know, just if you want to program something on a drum machine or a synth, you just, you know, play it and then quantize it. It goes to the grid. But the grid has to match the song. If the song doesn't match the grid, then nothing that you're doing matches. And it just feels like, you know, bowling balls in a dryer instead of, you know, everything kind of binding together. It was a nightmare. It was not the way I like to work at all. And then we had to dig up a bunch of old Emacs. I had Emacs 2 discs that I've been on an Emacs since 95. The first album was done on an Emacs, and the rest of the albums were done on a Kai S1000. So it was really a nightmare. When we did the Iwo Jesus EP, those were tracks from 1989, and almost none of it existed anymore. So we recreated all that stuff from scratch, and I had to go rent Last Temptation of Christ to get the samples from Last Temptation of Christ that were the kind of backing loops for Plastic Jesus. Don't tell Martin Scorsese that. But it was like trying to recreate that was, for me, easier because I just started from scratch. Like, okay, it was a bass synth. I don't remember exactly what bass synth it was, but I have a lot more to choose from now than I had back then. I had 3 back then. And so it's like, I'm going to find a cool one, and then I'm going to make it fatter. And so, yeah, that was fun. But redoing the old tracks was a nightmare. Yeah. John from Pitch Shifter. I haven't seen him forever.
Yeah, so I had asked him that question, and then he goes, yeah, so when I was kind of going through everything a little while ago when we were talking about doing these reunions and so forth, I found what would have been the next Pitch Shifter record sitting on a hard drive. And I was like, holy shit. And he was like, yeah, so like, here was this whole extra record that we had started and never worked on. So it's sometimes asking weird questions like that where you're like, man, so like old technology, how was it, you know, getting it to be new, like with everything that you can use? And then you get a story like that where you're like, yeah, and then I found a whole record that was pretty much almost done, but we never finished. Cool. And it's like, wow, all right, I'm glad I asked that weird question for that. Stabbing
had a record that after that self-titled, we sort of started trying to write some more stuff, and it didn't go anywhere. The band broke up pretty quickly after that, but there were 2 or 3 songs that were actually pretty cool. One of them was Home and You, which we did for a compilation CD for Cold Waves. A couple years ago, we pulled that out of the closet and kind of shined it up a little bit and gave it to them. There's a couple of pretty good songs that we had started writing that never saw the light of day. I have no idea where they are now.
But yeah, I was gonna say you did remind me as you were talking about the Passion of the Christ, or was it Passion of the Christ? That's not what you said. Last Temptation.
Last Temptation.
Yeah, Last Temptation. Sorry.
Yeah.
samples. Some of the stuff you use from what is it, Full Metal Jacket? Is it Full Metal Jacket?
Yeah. Yeah. Full Metal Jacket. See, that was before we were signed. That was 1989.
Okay.
So the rules seem different back then.
I was gonna say, how much did those samples cost to get cleared?
I don't think they ever got cleared technically.
Fair enough.
But we only sold 500 copies of that EP, so if they want their money, I don't mind giving them $500 or whatever. It's like,
well, I mean, now you got streaming, and those samples are up on streaming, so they can enjoy that half a cent.
Are those on streaming? Are those on Spotify?
Well, I mean, I was listening to the forgive me if I'm saying it incorrectly, the Iwo Jesus EP. That's on iTunes. I was listening to it most of the day, trying to be like, because between all the samples on that EP, I was like, how did they clear these samples?
We have a great legal department.
There you go.
Yeah, no, I don't think they're. Yeah, I don't think they're supposed to be on streaming. I wonder how they got up there.
I don't know.
I'll have to look into that. I think Walter's fear was, you can sell them on vinyl, but don't put anything up, because I think we could get in trouble for that. I'm like, okay, I'll look into that.
Yeah, because there's all the samples. I mean, especially on that EP, there's so many samples that are on that from well-known things, and I was just like, fuck, man, how you guys must have been like, either the label was like, meh, like, until we get a cease and desist, like, fuck it, like, because that's just, I mean, that's kind of how that was for a lot of you guys. Like, for a lot of industrial and sample use, it was kind of very punk rock DIY. Like, if you find out and you want to hit me with a cease and desist, then fuck it, like, do it. But until then, like, DIY till I die, and it is just what it is.
Yeah, so that was, back in the old days, we didn't care because we didn't think that we'd ever be on record. So.
But lastly, go ahead. No, I was just go ahead and finish.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it and wrapping up. But where can everyone find you or the band online?
They won't find me online. I hate social media. But the band has a Facebook page. I think it's Stabbing Westward, somehow misspelled, because the guy who has the official Stabbing Westward page won't give it to us.
Oh, lame.
So pretty lame. But I think if you Google it, and then we have an Instagram page and all that. We have all this stuff. I just don't go there. I think,
dude, I'm right there with you. I'm trying to hire someone to run our podcast socials, because I'm getting growingly irritated with having to use social media for various things. Like, I mean, that's one of the things that drove me to do the podcast, is I miss having kind of long form conversations with people. Yeah,
I hate it. So the only time I'm on my phone is if I'm doing something like this. I don't even look at my phone more than twice a day. So it's kind of my new thing since the quarantine.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time. I've had a lot of questions about your past and so forth, and I've had a blast chatting with you. Hopefully, this pandemic thing will kind of end somewhat soonish, and you guys can get back out on the road, so I can actually see you guys again, or for the first time, I should say.
Yeah, we had to cancel everything for the spring and summer, but hopefully in the fall, people will just give up and accept death as a part of life, and we can all go back to living.
Yeah, I'm actually getting ready to go to a bar with my wife and some of our friends and kind of see what their social distancing out and about is like at a social gathering place.
We had our kindergartner graduated yesterday on Zoom, and then they had a bike ride on the beach where we rode like 3 miles, a bunch of 5-year-olds on bikes. Pretty awesome. But they rode their bikes on the beach, on the pier, and I was shocked at like the thousands of people just on the beach hanging out with no mask. Yeah, it's pretty shocking how people just gave up, which is weird because all that work, all that sacrifice. I was like, okay, we're done, over it.
Well, enjoy the rest of your day with your kid and your family.
Thank you, sir.
Again, thank you so much for doing this, and hope to see you soon.
You're welcome. No worries. Enjoy your beer.
Yeah, thank you.
What are you drinking?
I am drinking a Bell's Lighthearted Ale. It's their light version of their Two-Hearted Ale. That's just kind of been my new go-to instead of a PBR. But I really wanted a nice Actually, I was going to make a really nice gin drink, and then I realized I didn't have any of the nice gin nor a lot of my mixers. So I was like, I guess beer it is.
I'm in a rum zone right now. I got like a big bottle of rum a couple weeks ago, and I'm a good halfway through it at the moment. And then double IPA. I like a good 12% double IPA.
Here's a fun absolute last question for you.
Okay.
Stabbing Westward as a beer, what would it taste like?
Definitely a bitter IPA. Definitely a bitter, hoppy IPA. Yeah, or a very dark Irish, like a Guinness, but like heavier.
So that definitely would have spouted it being a
stout.
porter or a stout, yeah.
Yeah, one of the two. But yeah, I can see the bitter IPA too.
Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll chat soon, hopefully.
Okay, thanks. Take care. Bye.
So that was my conversation with Christopher Hall of Stabbing Westward. Again, like, we kind of kept echoing in the intro there. It was a lot of fun. I kind of enjoyed shooting the shit about, the old Grand Rapids scene, and especially him being like, oh, I got a tattoo one of the last times I was there before we performed. I completely forgot there's a tattoo studio underneath the Reptile House. So it's kind of funny that I guess forever he has a keepsake of literally being here in town and playing while on tour.
Yeah, that is really cool.
I mean, I don't know what the tattoo is. I should have asked him what it was.
Should have had him show it to you. I think you guys were on the phone, but
Yeah, we were on the phone.
It happens.
Yeah. I also liked right at the end there when I was like, yeah, I'm kind of surprised that you were able to get like clearance on those samples. And he was like, yeah, we didn't, but we only pressed it on vinyl a limited amount. And I go, well, I mean, it's on like Spotify and shit. He goes, oh, what? So it's like, yeah, you might need to check into that, dude.
That's kind of funny.
This is kind of funny because like going back, like I went through and was listening to a ton of Stabbing Westward leading up to this. Were you someone that only kind of really liked that first record? Because it almost reminds me of the Finch Say Hello to Sunshine story, where it's like, the band basically was following in what they wanted to do. And then, they put out this other record and then everyone was like, this sucks. This isn't what we wanted. And sort of the same kind of thing applied where, as Krista was saying that, like, they fired some people that maybe they shouldn't have, that, everyone was like, well, I mean, you sold like 500,000 copies of this record, but you should have been selling like 1 million or 2 million. Like, here's what you need to do. And it's like, it's weird to hear someone go, well, I'm happy with where I'm at. I don't need that extra level of success. Like, I'm totally fine with being where we're at. Like, that's a good career. And you just don't hear shit like that. Like, you don't hear people make that comment, like where they're like, yeah, like the success we had on this record is just fine.
Yeah. I think the last time I heard anything like that was, I think it was when Toomey interviewed Jeff Walker of Carcass. I think that's the last time I've heard anything like that, where he asked, because they had just put out their Surgical Steel record. Actually, they'd been touring on it for like 2 years. And Toomey was like, yeah, so I mean, what else do we have? What else do you guys got, in the tank or whatever? He's like, I don't know, man, this record's going pretty well. I think we're just going to kind of keep doing that. And not exactly the same situation, but like I can totally understand the sentiment too, because like, we get messages all the time from people that are like, oh, you guys are only reaching, however many people with your podcast, and we could promote it more for you. And and half the time you go to their page and they have like a Facebook account and 2 followers, and you're like, yeah, sure. But I mean, it is one of those, like, being content with where you're at just shows kind of a level of devotion to your craft. Mm-hmm. And you being fine with, like, dude, I put this record out and that's all I really wanted to do. I don't care if people like it or hate it. They could take it or leave it. I don't have to sell 1 million records to feel good about myself.
Yeah, it was just really, I don't know, a lot of this was just really refreshing, but I think a lot of it is also the fact that, as we sort of joked when I was like, yeah, I don't really know how much older you are than me, and then he's like, oh, I've got you by almost 20 years. But it's like,
right,
you kind of forget that sometimes, like, we're so used to seeing the adverse where it's like everyone's like, more, give me all the fame, give me all the money, give me all this attention. And to see someone that's just like, well, I wasn't expecting any of this, so like everything that I kind of achieve is pretty cool, and I'm pretty satisfied with it. But like after a certain level, it's just like, well, I mean, how much more do I need?
Yeah, I mean, you really, I guess this depends on the person, but like it just seems to me like you don't need much.
No. I think that's something maybe a lot of people could apply to their lives too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like, and I can relate to that in kind of a way, because so my job is I literally go to work in the morning and I fix machines and then I go home, and like I'm kind of cool with that. Like, I don't make all the money, but I'm also not like vying for advancement opportunities or trying to like outdo people, because there's like a lot of weird backstabbing and like bad human behavior that comes with that a lot of the time. And I am ambitious in my creative projects, but like as far as work goes, it's kind of nice to just come in and do one thing.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, that's something I've actually been dealing with where I'm like, I could go somewhere else, I could go make more money, but like I have a pretty low stress job, and like I come in, I do it, and pretty much that's it. And that's the only expectation for the most part. And it's like, all right, like there's something kind of to be said about the simplicity of just having that luxury, I guess, of just kind of knowing that like what you do is what you do, and that's it. And you just do it good.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know. I get a lot of security with that. So I mean, it is definitely very refreshing to hear somebody be like, yeah, we had success and it was good enough for me. And I feel like it could have been like 50 records. Would have been fine.
Yeah, I don't know. I just, as a whole, and we keep kind of saying it, so I guess this is a good spot to start wrapping this up. But it's just one of those where it's interesting. It will be interesting to see where the band kind of goes once everything kind of picks back up. If there is still, I don't want to say a demand, but if there's still, the fandom of the band where people will kind of forgive the last album that maybe they didn't, like and kind of fell off from. And just remember that, like, the times and the music that they did love from this band, and if they'll be able to have that fandom support them and kind of bring them back to where they can have kind of a second chance at a career with this. So I'm really interested to see what, the new record sounds like, the EP that apparently is also going to be coming out at some point. The fact that they have so much music just, kind of planning on releasing has me really excited for the future of what Stabbing Westward will be in, 2020, or I guess more importantly, maybe 2021. All of that aside, though, if you would like to keep up with Stabbing Westward, it's pretty easy. It's pretty much Stabbing Westward on everything. However, Facebook and Twitter, it's Stabbing West WRD. I guess someone maybe had the A, so they had to get clever with it and figure out a new way around that. Chris himself, as you heard at the end, does not have any socials, so I don't have anything like that I need to plug, but someone who does have socials is Dan. And he can tell you where he can be found on them.
Well, yeah, I do have socials. So I can be found, let's see, I have a Gmail account, discussmetaldan@gmail.com, Twitter at discussmetaldan. It's kind of a theme there. But on Facebook, I'm just under plain old Daniel Terry, not Discuss Metal Dan, because that'd be kind of weird, right? Like commenting on my grandma's videos and being like, hey, I'm Discuss Metal Dan. I don't know. It'd be weird. So yeah, I'm just Daniel Terry on Facebook. But you can find me and my other not quite as congested voice over at discussmetal.com. I've got like 12, 13 podcasts over there.
And if you would like to keep up with all things this podcast, it is simple enough. Go to BREWspeakPod.com. Everything you will possibly want to know or look at related to the podcast is there. That's why it's a central hub. So just go there. If you would like to support us monetarily, you can go to patreon.com/BrewspeakPod. There is some sweet perks. There is some swag that you can get and some episodes that you can get as well. And speaking of swag, if you would like to support our sponsors, we have a ton of them. We have On Point Pomade. Keep your beard and hair looking on point. Can't wait to get another haircut so I can actually utilize my pomade again. And I got to get Dan this beard oil here soon.
Yeah, I'm drying up over here.
But if you use our code BSP15, you get 15% off your total order. Thoroughly enjoy having them on and having something that allows us guys to, have our best looking faces present and put forward. I don't know. However you want to interpret that. Just buy the product. BSP15. Save some money.
There it is.
Speaking of saving some money, if you want to head over to rockabilia.com, you can go use our code BREW15 and get 15% off your total purchase order. They have over 500,000 items in their online store, ranging from just about anybody we've had on this podcast. There is actually a Stabbing Westward t-shirt. I think it's a ladies shirt, though, so unfortunately Dan and I, in theory, couldn't wear it, but
I might be able to.
Yeah, you'd have to cut the sleeves off, because the sleeves are a giveaway that it's a women's cut.
Oh, well, women work out too.
That's true. But yeah, they have a Stabbing Westward shirt. Pretty much any guest that we've had on this podcast, there's something for them. They have Testament gloves. They have a Lamb of God candle. They have pop culture stuff. I've seen a House t-shirt. I think they have a handful, I think a Jaws, some tank tops and so forth. You can think of it, they probably have it. And you don't have to worry about the integrity of the quality of the garments. It's 100% guaranteed, and they're 100% officially licensed through the bands and the avenues that they have them through. They're 100% licensed, so not only are you getting cool swag, but you know that it's not going to tear on you or wash and fade very quickly. And that's important when you're spending your hard-earned money on new clothes. So head on over there, let them know we're sending you. Use our code BREW15, save 15% off your total purchase order. And last but not least is the Bean Bastard. Go get you some delicious coffee at the Bean Bastard. Facebook and Instagram at the Bean Bastard. I just saw on their Instagram page earlier today, they're doing local pickups from their store and stuff, so you can order online and go pick it up the next day, which I think is pretty cool for a small independent coffee company to be able to do such a thing.
Yeah, I think it's pretty legit.
And for the BREWtally Speaking Podcast, I am John.
And I am Dan.
And we will talk to you all next week.
Fucking sucked. Oh, that fucking sucked. Shao Kahn, what'd you think?
That was pathetic.
Yeah. Yeah. Coach, what'd you think?
Fucking embarrassing!
Okay. I mean, I knew it was gonna fucking suck, but I think those guys were a little rude. Austin Powers?
How about new?
Okay, I thought we were gonna get the Austin Powers vote. We did not. John, use that for your podcast. It fucking sucks, but you knew what you were getting into. It's your own fault. It will result in less listens. You're gonna see a decline in listeners if you start the show with that. You're gonna see 30 seconds in, the number will plummet. And I will be there at the bottom of the plummet saying, I fucking told you, don't use this fucking riff. It sucks. But it's yours.